The Nebraska Cornhuskers are generating a lot of buzz this offseason because we'll talk about their offensive additions that they made, including a quarterback in Dylan Rhule, who was hand up. I thought he was really good last year. All right, for being thrown into the fire like that as a true freshman, you're going to be replacing some key pieces on that defense and on that offensive line. But boy, are people really excited about this team. And you look at the schedule, getting Michigan at home, if you find a way to win that game, you're looking at the rest of your schedule, and some of your toughest games remaining are going to be at home. Of course, Penn State, you don't expect to beat Penn State, right? But we've talked about this before. Teams like Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, you kind of want those games on the road when you're this tier in the Big Ten, because then those other games give you an opportunity. It gives you a higher ceiling, in terms of your win total that you can achieve. And who knows, all right? If you win 10 games on the schedule and your only two losses are to, Michigan and Penn State, who knows what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be looking at, because you don't know how good Cincinnati is going to be in the Big 12. You don't know how good Michigan State's going to be. You don't know how many wins, Iowa's going to have, although that game is so silly every year, the Nebraska-Iowa game. It's such a silly football game. But yeah, this is going to be a very, very interesting uh, team to look out for. And I think a keystone team in terms of how teams are going to be finishing in the standings in the Big Ten, because I think that's a game that nearly everyone has on their schedule as being a toss-up game, quote unquote. Right? Like everyone's like, oh, that's a winnable game, but also losable game. Like if you have Nebraska on your schedule, you're not chalking them up as a win. You're not chalking them up as an L. So I think this is going to be one of the keystone teams in terms of watching how this Big Ten plays out in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, a lot of that will be put on the growth and development of Dylan Rhule paired with the offensive coordinator hire of Dana Holgorsen, right? They brought him in. He ended up calling plays the last couple weeks of the season. He turns into the full-time gig, and here we go. And you've had all offseason to construct an offense around Rhule to make it dynamic. And it sounds like you've done that. There's a lot of optimism here at every position, man. Maybe with the exception of running back, and more so just because you kind of know what you're getting there. Although Isaiah Mosey could be a fun guy, but a wide receiver, you're bringing some guys, tight ends, you got a lot of talent there, and then the offensive line has high potential, man. Especially with some of the transfers you bring in. So this will be a fun group. In terms of Dylan Rhule, excited to see him grow and develop. You saw growing pains. You saw the flashes, everything you kind of expected. I think you got, which is great because you were expecting a lot out of a five-star quarterback, and I think he delivered in most every way. Now it's for that year two jump. Now expectations are high. Going to be someone that is relied upon heavily in this offense, on this team, and looking at their schedule, in most of the games, he should be the best quarterback on the field, with the exception of probably Penn State. And then depends on how you feel about Jaden Maeve. Depends on what side of the bed Aiden Childs woke up on if he wants to turn into a star. And obviously Bryce Underwood will go talent for talent with just about anybody in the country, right? So those would be interesting matchups in terms of quarterback on quarterback. But that's how I'm seeing Dylan Rhule this year.
And in the running back room, they didn't bring in any transfers, which I was like shocked by. You lose Dante Dowdle, who's your main guy. Emmett Johnson I like a lot, but do we love the rest of this room? I think there's talent in here for sure. You got to kind of find it. It's a lot of unproven folks aside from Emmett Johnson in this room, but what is the realistic expectation from this running back room? Is it just going to be the Emma Johnson show, or are we going to see, some of these young, four-star freshmen have a real role in this offense?
Yeah, it's something that will be interesting. I think the upside of this room will be dependent, I think, on the growth of Johnson, right? Propelling himself into more of a lead role, and then about some of these freshmen, how ready are they to play? Mosey and Mackay, right? So it'll be fun to watch. I will say in terms of running back rooms in the Big Ten, there's a lot of them. This one, I think if you did have to point to like a spot I'm not crazy pumped up about, on this Nebraska offense, it's probably this room right here. But it also might not make a huge difference if Rhule is just dotting people up and you got a good offensive line. You can make that running back room look better than it even is.
Yeah, let's hope that that offensive line. We'll talk about the offensive line, but in terms of the, sorry to just move on to the wide receiver room just like that, but the transfers that you brought in were high level transfers. Okay, Malachi Coleman leaves. That's a guy that mega high recruit. In the state of Nebraska, they get him. They're excited about him. He moves on to go to Minnesota because he couldn't find the field. Bringing in Dane Key and Neziah Hunter, like those were two of the bigger names in the portal. Guys that wanted to come play for Dylan Raiola. You know, how are we feeling about this wide receiver room? Because with the addition of those guys, I'm like, okay, I think there's a legitimate wide receiver room here that can produce at a pretty high level.
Yeah, you've seen them, I feel like offseason after offseason bring in like fun pieces in the portal, and it just for whatever reason hasn't always clicked. I think you pair these guys who I feel really good about. Dane Key will probably be your best receiver. And Isaiah Hunter coming from Cal, which did some really nice things last year as a younger guy in a Cal room that was just littered with injuries. You pair that with Corey Barney, right? A guy that burst onto the scenes last year with 54 receptions, was really stinking good for you as a freshman, right? That was awesome. You pair him with Cortez Mills, right? Four-star kid, all the talent in the world from Florida. He's really stinking good too. A guy that was a former Oklahoma commit, right? A guy that doesn't have to be relied upon in terms of every down and down out consistency, but he can do some big things for you. It's a fun room. I think behind that, you could see some fall off, but the good news there is you can replace that depth with tight ends, and you got some good ones, I think. So that wide receiver room, I think, a lot of fun in terms of what you project from those top four.
Yeah, but a tight end is funny too because you lose Thomas Fidone and you lose Borkersher to the portal, and you have a former quarterback playing tight end. You like Carter Nelson. Lindenmeyer, is a guy that's played a lot there. It's a funny tight end room because it's actually pretty good. Like when you look at, I mean, folks, if you watch Nebraska and you're not a Nebraska fan necessarily, you probably remember Heinrich Hardberg, but you probably remember him playing quarterback. But 6'5", 230, I mean, played a little bit last year. I mean, guys, I mean, the coaching staff loves him there. If he can take that next step, I mean, Eli Stowers was a guy who's probably one of, if not the best tight ends in college football heading into this year, was a quarterback for his first 3 seasons. So why couldn't Heinrich Hardberg, take another step there at tight end? Why couldn't Carter Nelson, be another guy that just coming in, still a young guy? Why can't he take the next step as well? And then Lyndon Myers just going to be an absolute road grader, solid guy that, you know, Cornhusker fans are just love.
Yeah, super excited about this room. That all eyes are on, I think, Carter Nelson in terms of what he can do, you know, in terms of elevating the upside of this room here, and pairing that, with like Dylan Raiola in this passing game here. But yeah, Lindenmeyer's fun to watch. Harburg is obviously like a good story as well. He can give you some versatility, not only in the tight end room, but also on special teams with his ability to throw the football and give you sneaky packages there, win special teams, win games like that, because you're going to have to in this Big Ten, right? But yeah, I think this is a solid group here. You're going to miss Borkinger in terms of what he can do, but yeah, Lindenmeyer I think will be just fine for you.
I am excited to see this offensive line because I think it's pretty talented across the board. If Elijah Pritchett, right, who's going to be playing tackle for you coming from Alabama, if he is good, and he can be, if he's good, if Spindler coming from Notre Dame, if he ends up being good, um, he was a solid player for Notre Dame. It's funny because Notre Dame's had, Pendleton and Spindler, transfer out of there, and they're still going to be a really good offensive line. Like they didn't even like care all that much those guys left, but that's a good piece to add. You know, Ben Scott was kind of a huge centerpiece for you. You know, but he's gone. Bryce Benhart was honorable mention All Big Ten guy over there, right tackle, who was pretty solid. Uh, he's gone as well. I kind of like this group. Not sure how I love the depth. Got a lot of young, young depth, right? That's what's going to be behind these guys. But if they can stay healthy and keep Dylan Rhule upright, this offense can kind of hit levels that I don't think Nebraska's seen offensively in years.
Could be a really fun group to watch. I think a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, the Nebraska offensive line was just one of the worst in Power Four. A long ways away from that, right? With credit to the recruiting, credit to the development, credit to filling with the portal. The good news is you're seeing guys with experience. You're seeing guys with a lot of talent. The right tackle being almost 6'10", Prochaska, that's going to be just crazy to watch and what he can do. Good thing Dylan Rhule is no small guy either, so be able to see over him. But yeah, it's a fun group. You talked about it. I don't have too much worry about it. I think the upside can be hit there, especially if Pritchett kind of rounds into form. We've seen him at times be at Alabama. We've also seen him be a liability. So hopefully you have some depth in this room behind that in case it doesn't quite work out. But all in all, it's not a bad thing to pick up a guy who's played a lot of SEC football at tackle for you.
So the offensive line, you don't have a lot of depth. The defensive line got murdered this offseason in terms of, I mean, think about it. You're probably your top 7 snap getters on the defensive line last year. One of them is returning in Cam Leonard, who's, by the way, fantastic. But you're losing Ty Robinson, you're losing the Polar Bear, you're losing Jamari Butler. You are losing a significant amount of pieces. And if you think Elijah Judy is going to be the guy that ends up stepping up, I know he was highly rated. But if you think he's going to be the guy that's just going to play that same role that some of those interior defensive linemen played last year at such a high level, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know that he's necessarily going to do that. He could. He absolutely could. He's built like an absolute brick. He could definitely make that jump. Could Keona Davis, as young as he is, does he make that jump in the interior as well? I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. But that's a group that concerns me a little bit. And we were on this show last year at this time being like, that is the best position group that Nebraska has on this team. And they kind of proved it last year. And Principal Yellen is also gone as well. Like, it's talented, but boy, did you lose a lot of production from last year.
You're also losing your defense coordinator, right? Tony White's off to Florida State, so John Butler comes in.
Yeah.
He was a guy that was there last year on staff, right? But then kind of comes into his own as defensive coordinator. He hasn't called plays since 2013. He's been in the NFL like a good amount, right? Coaching a lot of defensive backs there. So obviously doing good stuff. But defensive coordinator at Penn State. And in 2013, I mean, it was a rough era for Penn State, right, in terms of talent-wise. And they were nothing special. I think it's not a knock on him either way. I think they were dealing with some serious talent issues. But yeah, it's definitely of concern. I still like a lot of guys in this room. You brought up a bunch of those names. What are you going to get from the 5-star kid? Williams Noanery, right? What are you going to get? My expectations are low in terms of like, you just don't see guys that are 5 stars that don't play and then like transfer out. Like a lot of times there's a reason that some of those teams let him go. The optimist in me says he's going to be an absolute freak in nature for you. I think probably more so down the line in terms of 2026, 2027, even 2028, then maybe 2025. But I still like some of the names in this room. I want to see a jump from Keona Davis and Cam Lenhart, though, before I feel pretty good about it. Riley Van Poppel's also been around the block, too. I know he's been banged up at times, but you're getting worse. You are getting worse, no doubt. But again, there's some talent to work with there. It's not a bare cupboard. in terms of like I've been hearing some national media talk about this group as being one of the limiters of this Nebraska team. And while they're probably right, I just think it's maybe not as bad as you could. I think the upside might not be there to make this team elite in terms of college football playoff, like to win games in the college football playoff come December. But like in terms of like hitting your ceiling of a team, yeah, I think this group can be okay.
Well, if they're just okay, right? You also lose a lot of linebacker. All right. So your front seven, you are losing like 9 legitimate contributors in your front seven. That's a big deal. John Bullock was pretty solid for you last year. MJ Sherman. What do we like here? I mean, I don't hate Watson Trent. I mean, that's kind of your big guy that you got in the portal who was really solid there. What are we looking at here? I mean, because it's guys that have played, guys that we've seen, Nebraska fans I know like a lot of these players, but in terms of like the super high upside, now granted, linebacker isn't necessarily a position it's not a premier position, right? So you can have just good linebacker play and be okay with that. Is that what we're going to see from this linebacking core at Nebraska?
I think if you can be replacement level, I think you'll kind of take that in terms of what it's for. Marquez Watson Trent, you talked about him. He could be a gem for you, no doubt. He's a little bit undersized, but also like I'm not too worried. I like to see linebackers who have played a ton of football and have productive careers. Usually that's a good recipe. Is it Vincent Shavers? Is it Javon Wright? Guys that are kind of stepping up who have played a little bit, haven't really started a ton in their career. So they'll be expected to carry a lot heavier roles. What do you do with Deshaun McCullough? Does he play a couple different positions for you? And then like Christian Jones, the young guy, right? Is he ready to play? Probably not, but at least there's talent in that room behind a couple of those, older but less experienced guys. I don't know if I love this group. Like I said, if you get average to above average play, I think you'll take that.
Yeah, uh, that'd be really nice. Now the secondary, I thought last year it'd be a little bit better than it was. Um, but I think it was still pretty good. I think a lot of that had to do too with the pass rush being as good as it was. Um, but you get a lot of what you had back last year, and the guys that they got in the portal, it's hard to tell whether or not they were attempting to just get depth pieces or whether they, were trying to get guys like bigger name guys to come into the portal. I don't really know the beat like that necessarily, but I think they added some really good depth here. And if they get, some good play, like Hartzog, I think is a good player. Deshaun Singleton, I think, is a solid player as well. Wright, I think, is okay. There, I don't know. I think a question mark position for me for sure in terms of what is this going to look like when you don't have the pass rush that you did last year, right? And were you just bringing in depth because you feel good about this position as a coaching staff, or did you miss on some higher end defensive backs in the portal? Which, to be honest, there were really only a handful of guys from the DB perspective in the transfer portal that I could think of that were like really big names. So it's like if you missed out on them, like so be it. LSU probably got half of them, But what is your expectation for this DB room?
Yeah, I think we'll find out pretty early against Cincinnati week 1, Thursday night, right? They're bringing in a ton of portal receivers, trying to overhaul that passing game. Obviously, I will continue to drive the Brendan Sorsby train at quarterback for Cincinnati, but that's where we're at there. I I don't hate the idea of Andrew Marshall getting some looks, especially early in that season. Guy coming over from Idaho. I think Wright and Singleton and Hartzog and Buford are great starts. Like fine, like you know what you're getting out of them. I don't know if they're elite upside with those guys, but And then you supplement with guys, Andrew Marshall, can Justin Rhett, play for you. Obviously, talented kid. Anytime you add a Georgia DB into your room, that's going to perk some ears, obviously, in terms of just physically what he can do. But yeah, Andrew Marshall will be interesting. And then Jameer Khan also, a couple guys coming from smaller schools. Can they kind of emerge in that cornerback room? But you also might see the lumps, right? Like I know you kind of trust you guys coming back, but that cornerback 2 spot, like you might see some lumps. And then the good news is, like you get by Cincinnati, you scrape by there, at least you're doing that at home, right? And then like Michigan will be breaking in receivers in a quarterback room. Michigan State, like obviously if Childs is on, he'll be on. But like the more you get through the schedule, you don't see a passing attack that scares you until week 10. You got time. You got time to figure things out. Tool around in the non-conference, like start developing and like really self-scouting. You might have, you got that the whole time to kind of prepare and prep for a big game in week 10. That is USC. But yeah, this defensive back room, like I say, I think the floor is okay. The ceiling remains to be seen.
I do think the Cincinnati game's actually at Arrowhead, believe it or not.
Oh, you're right. Good call. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
So last thing before we get into, picking win totals, the special teams wasn't great last year. All right. I don't really know what to expect from, a new punter and a new kicker this year. Although hiring Mike Eckler back from Tennessee was a good get for you guys. Haven't seen him there, you know, uh, since a couple regimes ago. But I think that was a good hire. I like Mike Eckler. He had special teams for Tennessee rolling at a pretty high level. I'm sure Nebraska fans are excited to have him back, or at least I would hope so. Um, so yeah, I mean, I anticipate that getting better than it was. All right, hard to project the kicking situation, when you got just a couple new guys in there. But from a win total perspective, for Nebraska, I mean, I've seen people be on both sides of this. Right, we're gonna be picking this one at 7.5. Of course, depends on where you look, what you're going to get that priced at. But generally, you're going to be paying a little bit of juice to the over, minus 140, minus 150, that area, I guess. Getting to 8 wins, all right. We'll call Penn State a for sure loss. That means like between Cincinnati, Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern, USC, and Iowa, on those 8 games, right? You got to win 6 of them, right?
Yep.
Or 5 of them, I guess. Wait. No, yeah. You got to win 6 of those games. That's a lot of wins. Matt Rhule teams take a huge jump in year 3 every single time. All right, you saw it at Temple. You saw it at Baylor. You didn't get to see it with Carolina on the Panthers, right? You didn't make it there. I'm fascinated with this team. I'm a little bit skeptical about the defensive line, though. I think I'm going to roll leaning to the under here.
Is it 7.5? What are we picking at?
We're picking at 7.5. I think I'm going to lean under here and probably regret that, Nebraska fans. So hopefully that can be your jinx that gets you over that hump.
I'll fade you here. I'm gonna go over, and here's why. I think situationally this team gets better. Last year, they played how many one-score games? It was 7, and you went 2-5. And I understand that it's not just gonna flip like that. And obviously, Nebraska fans, they understand what it's been like struggling to close out one-score games. Right? There's an unholy amount of losses on the Scott Frost era, and that hasn't changed with Matt Rhule yet. I think this team gets better situationally, right? Special teams coordinator improvement, offense coordinator improvement, right? We'll see about quarterback improvement, right? And all that kind of stuff that comes with that. And also, too, like, I'm staring at the schedule and I see one loss. Like at Penn State, fine. Have that one in Happy Valley there. Go for it. Although Nebraska's coming off a bye week and that, like, who knows? But anyways, have that. I think this team is going to win some one-score games this year, more than 2-5, and that gets you to 8 wins. I'm going to go the over here with upside getting to 9-3. Couple games I'm circling, obviously Michigan, obviously USC, obviously Penn State, but then you've got some tough rivalry games at Minnesota and Iowa. I think you do enough. I think you do enough to win 8 games here. And obviously that Cincinnati game I think will tell us a lot. But also, like, we saw this Nebraska team get blown out by Colorado and then fight and claw their way back into like relevancy into the season. And like the team just got better over the year. Yeah, you got blown up by Indiana. Cool. You ran into a buzzsaw of like an on fire Bloomington and an Indiana team that was just playing out of their mind. Everyone else you gave a lot of fits to, even in losses. And I know that's the moral victory. Don't get it for you, but yeah, I'll go over 7.5 for Nebraska.
Yeah, I think that's not crazy at all. And I think like the home away splits, like getting the tough games at like Iowa, USC, Michigan at home,
Yeah.
right? That adds to the ceiling of your schedule.
Just win one.
But
Just win one.
but it also makes your floor lower, right? Because if you drop those games and you catch yourself with your pants down traveling across the country to UCLA, or you catch your pants down in Minneapolis, or say at Arrowhead, things don't go the way that you want,
Yeah.
you know. Also, too, we're relying on Dylan Rhule to stay healthy, right? And he was banged up at times last year. Like, he got roughed up, and you're looking at a lot of new pieces on the offensive line. So that's why it's a little bit scary for me to take that over, but I understand the ceiling of this schedule and also the potential for this team to potentially make the college football playoffs. I get that. So I'll fade you though a little bit. That's fine. I'll lean under. No money will be put down on that at all because I hope for the best for Matt Rhule. Love him as a coach. I think this Nebraska team and the fans deserve way more than they get.